Hello students, I'm Imkong Tunlapungan, an anthropologist from the Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today we will be discussing on the module Conservation of Primate from the paper Human Origin and Evolution. Well, the learning objectives of the module are to learn about primate conservation. Number 2, to understand the major threats to primate species. Number 3, to learn about primate conservation, health and awareness. Number 4, to understand the futuristic approach for conservation of primates. Firstly, let us discuss briefly about conservation. Conservation is a subject much discussed today by scientific organizations, civic and philanthropic groups, countries and governments throughout the world. At the request of the Global Environmental Facility for the United Nations Environment Programme, some 1,500 scientists from around the world met in Jakarta, Indonesia and India to discuss the plight of the Earth's fauna and flora. Their conclusion was that the animals and plants of the world are being destroyed at an alarming rate. This august group suggested the following reasons for the decline in species. The first reason, increased population and economic development which deplete biological resources. Second reason, human failure to consider the consequences of actions that destroy the habitat, exploit natural resources, and introduce non-native species. Reason 3, failure of economic markets to recognize the value of maintaining the diversity of species. Number 4, increased human migration, travel, and international trade. Number 5, the spread of water and air pollution. Homo sapiens are the common factor in each of these statements. Our species today has about 5.7 billion individuals with an estimated 7.8 billion expected by 2050. We occupy all continents, most environments, and the majority of the Earth's latitudes. There is little doubt that we are the dominant species on Earth today and that we possess the power to save or destroy the planet. As the well-known naturalist Jim Fowler recently wrote concerning the extinction of species, that we can no longer ignore their true value to Earth's ecosystem of which we are also a part. Non-human primates comprise only a small fraction of the Earth's total species population, with approximately 200 different species today, but fortunately there is a growing concern for their conservation in many countries. This is particularly true in those countries with tropical forests, where about 90% of the world's wild primate populations live, because it is those areas that are undergoing the greatest destruction of primate habitats due to timber extraction and clearing forest for human occupation. As the forests disappear, so do the animals that live in them. One primatologist has so cogently pointed out that primates and apes in particular are threatened because of the very characteristics that were originally the keys to their success. Now, this figure illustrates the global primate species richness, distributions, and the percentage of species threatened and with declining populations. Numbers in rate by each region refer to the number of extant species present. The bars at the bottom show the percent of species threatened with extinction and the percent of species with declining populations in each region. Percentage of threatened species and percentage of species with declining populations in each region from tables S1 to S4. Geographical range data of living native species from the IUCN Red List. are overlaid onto a 0.5 degree resolution equal area grid. In cases in which a species range was split into multiple subspecies, these were merged to create a range map for the species. Mainland Africa includes small associated islands. Now the major threats to primate species. There are three major threats to wild primate species, that is habitat destruction, hunting for food and sport, and live capture for export or local trade. Of course, this varies from country to country, but one or more of them are operating wherever primates are having problems. Each of these conditions exacts its own toll on wild primate populations, but without doubt, the most catastrophic is habitat destruction. Forests are being removed for agriculture, lumber, industrial purposes, and fuel for cooking. Here again, the major impetus underlying the destruction of tropical forests is human population growth. Population growth in most tropical countries is much greater than in other countries, averaging over 3% per year. Brazil averages about 2.3%, Nigeria 3.3%, and Kenya over 4% compared with 0.7% and 0.2% for United States and Germany. This figure illustrates the factors driving primate population declines and possible mitigating approaches. Deforestation, for whatever reasons, causes the death of thousands of primates each year. The survival of 58% of the species of living primates is being jeopardized primarily by deforestation. At the current rate of destruction, it is estimated that by the end of the 20th century, most of the tropical forest will have disappeared, to be replaced by subsistence farming, permanent farming, and large plantations. Land taken for these purposes is often overworked by continuous use, which leads to erosion and soil depletion. Much of the land becomes poor in production value as more and more is asked of it. The absence of the once lush ecosystem of the rainforest diminishes the Earth's ability to process the carbon dioxide out of the air, and it changes the weather cycles for the whole world. Now, the result is not only the loss of many primate species and a real threat to ourselves, but the loss of thousands of other animals and plant species, many of which have been shown to have potential for us in health and medicine, not to mention the enrichment of our world by variety, diversity, and beauty. This figure illustrates the agricultural expansion and decline in forest cover for the period 1990 to 2010 in primate range regions. One of the largest tropical islands in the world, that is Madagascar, houses the world's total population of wild lemurs, about half of the world's chameleons, and some of the world's largest earthworms. The consensus was that both climatic shifts and agriculturists may have caused habitat loss, which when added to non-sustainable rates of human hunting activities probably were responsible for the extinctions. There is little doubt that many lemur species as well as other animal groups became extinct following human occupation of the island. Unfortunately, there is evidence that the pre-occupation continues today. Lemurs are eaten in certain regions of the island, and the aye, one of the world's most endangered primates, is not only hunted and eaten in parts of Madagascar, but is also killed because it is thought to cause bad luck to the natives if it enters their villages. Hunting remains a problem in many countries where wild primates are considered an important food source. For example, in the Amazon, in parts of Central and Western Africa, in Southeast Asia, and to some extent in parts of Madagascar. Today, with the availability of modern firearms, primates in many countries are having a difficult time maintaining their breeding populations. Hunting for skins and other body parts, particularly the skulls for ornamentation such as rugs and coats, is a profitable business in many parts of the world. Now let us discuss about primate conservation and health. Capturing wild primates for pets and biomedical research has been a considerable drain on certain wild primate species. Fortunately, the popularity of primates as pets has apparently waned since the 1970s in many countries, and international trade regulations have become more stringent. Primates are difficult to raise, tame, and breed. They also may carry diseases such as the hepatitis, tuberculosis, and several virulent types of viruses, for example, the Ebola virus. There are presently ongoing task forces made up of researchers, veterinarians, and other concerned individuals to reduce the incidence of primates kept as pets. Today, the majority of primates used in biomedical research in the United States are raised in breeding colonies. Consequently, there is less demand for importing primates from the wild. The use of captive breed rather than imported primate benefits both laboratory research and natural populations of primates. While the National Institute of Health has chartered and regulated several primate centers within the United States that contribute to a wide range of studies and research, including breeding primates for research. Unfortunately, this is not true for all countries that still import primates for research, although international rules have restricted the trafficking in primates over the last couple of decades. Now let us discuss about the awareness level on primate conservation. In recent years, many of the large zoos in the world have sponsored symposia and conferences on conservation, which have resulted in many important publications. Also, zoos, scientific societies, and many private and federal funding organizations have provided funds for naturalistic field studies of primates that have contributed immensely to our knowledge of the myriad problems involved in primate conservation. The American Society of Primatologists, that is the premier organization in the United States for primate scientists, supports several conservation programs with donated funds. In addition, the Wildlife Preservation Trust International, the Fauna and Flora Preservation Society, the National Geographic Society, the African Wildlife Foundation, and the LSB Leakey Foundation support conservation. One would be remiss not to mention the pioneering studies of the 3 great apes in their natural habitats by 3 women scientists. Jen Goodall began her research on the chimpanzee in the early 1960s and continues today, nearly 4 decades later. All 3 have expressed deep concern for primate conservation, and their publications and public lectures through the years have brought a better understanding and appreciation of the great apes and their endangered plight to the general public. Some believe that the mountain gorilla would not have survived to the present day without the tireless efforts of Dian Fossey to save these magnificent creatures. Now let us see what is primate conservation, and let us delve into the futuristic approach. Future conservation strategies must consider the local economic situation. Forest conservation is not a high economic priority for most developing countries, yet deforestation, as discussed above, is one of the major reasons for the loss of primate species. People must be made more aware of their relationship with the natural world and how to coexist with it in multi-use areas. Such areas can be used but not used up. It is also important that field workers be aware of the sensitivities and cultural mores of the local people and not appear as new colonialists or missionaries spreading their own brand of truth. The principal reference work on endangered species is the Red Dada book produced by the Conservation Monitoring Center of the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources in Cambridge, England. In addition, excellent discussions of the serious emergency regarding primate survival in the wilderness can be found in the other books listed, and many articles written in primatology, anthropology, and zoology journals about the plights of specific primate species that are available in our university and public libraries. There are some 182 species of non-human primates living today. Of this, about 128 species are monkeys, of which 77 are Old World monkeys and 51 are New World primates. Prosimians comprise about 41 species, while apes are usually grouped into 13 species. In 1983, it was estimated that about one-third of these species were on the endangered species list, that is according to Olfhill. This figure illustrates the world primates facing extinction. Now, it is quite apparent that non-human primates depend on the tropical forest for their very lives. Most non-human primate species are arboreal creatures living in tropical rainforest and are dependent upon the forest and its products for their various lifestyles. Some species are terrestrial in that they forage on the ground during the day, but even they return to the trees at night for protection. According to Richard, the majority of non-human primates spend from 40% to 80% of their feeding time eating fruit, leaves, seeds, herbs, insects, gums, and saps. It is both clear and disturbing that destruction of these habitats is eliminating thousands of primate species each year. Unfortunately, one other primate is responsible for most of this deforestation, and that is Homo sapiens. This is according to Swindler. Now, this figure illustrates the phylogenetic signal as a predictor of extinction risk in the world's primate, which is the distribution of trait values for 340 primate species. After taxonomic updates, the working phylogeny included 350 of the 367 species considered in the molecular supertree, of which 340 are not data deficient. Closely related species are more likely to have the same trait status than species taken randomly from the phylogeny, supporting a strong phylogenetic signal. Now, the data for Africa include Madagascar. Now, let us see the IUCN Red List categories. It consists of critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, near threatened, and least concern. Now, let us summarize this module. It is obvious that many primates are endangered by human actions and that great effort needs to be placed in conserving the forests they inhabit. However, we believe that there is reason to be optimistic as the rate of forest loss is declining. A great deal is now known about primate diseases, and programs to decrease the bushmeat industry are being successfully implemented. This optimism should not make us reduce our efforts. Rather, this knowledge of the threat offers great opportunities for scientists to make significant contributions to primate conservation. In many respects, the research done over the last few decades has laid out very clear objectives that can be met to promote primate conservation, for example, by offering people sustainable alternatives to the bushmeat trade, reducing deforestation and promoting reforestation, developing parks, and making protocols for reducing the risk of disease transmission between people and primates, and reducing carbon emissions to curb climate change. Certainly, there are many questions that now need to be addressed to make primate conservation a reality. These questions include: what will direct depopulated areas into a process of ecological recovery or into plantation economies? How can conservation gains be made from declining rural populations in a socially responsible way? What are the effective measures to reduce the transmission of diseases among people and non-human primates? How is it possible to reduce the national and international trade in bushmeat? And how will climate change impact specific regions and primate species? All of these questions provide the foundation upon which to build research programs that will make a difference and provide the information needed to construct informed conservation or management plans. Homo sapiens species today has about 5.7 billion individuals, with an estimated 7.8 billion expected by 2050. Non-human primates comprise only a small fraction of the Earth's total species population, with approximately 200 different species today. But fortunately, there is a growing concern for their conservation in many countries. This is particularly true in those countries with tropical forests, where about 90% of the world's wild primate populations live, because it is those areas that are undergoing the greatest destruction of primate habitats due to timber extraction and clearing forest for human occupation. There are three major threats to wild primate species, that is, habitat destruction, hunting for food and sport, and live capture for export or local trade. Primates are difficult to raise, tame, and breed. They also may carry diseases such as the hepatitis, tuberculosis, and several virulent types of viruses. In recent years, many of the large zoos in the world have sponsored symposia and conferences on conservation, which have resulted in many important publications. Also, zoos, scientific societies, and many private and federal funding organizations have provided funds for naturalistic field studies of primates that have contributed immensely to our knowledge of the myriad problems involved in primate conservation. So, future conservation strategies must consider the local economic situation. Forest conservation must be a high economic priority. Creating large national parks and wildlife reserves, and people must be made more aware of their relationship with the natural world and how to coexist with it in multi-use areas. As conservationists, we must pay more attention to the health policy and procedures in our own backyard and work hard to protect endangered or threatened species through reducing deforestation and poaching. That's all for this module. Thank you so much for listening.